Okay, so now that I've got my floor set up, I'm going to go ahead and do the ceilings now. And as I was saying, the ceilings aren't much more difficult than floors, but the ceiling in this space has a couple of levels. So we have to have a look at that first. And so I'm just going to get the drawings, which I thought I'd downloaded here. Oh no, I put them onto the V drive, didn't I? So I'll go and get them from there. 5x, here we are. And so here are the JPEGs, which, if you've forgotten, is good to see as well. Okay, so here's our section where we can see those two main ceiling levels. So that's why we made those levels earlier for these two ceilings. But then we've also got a floor above. Technically you don't really need to make that, but it doesn't hurt. And in fact it might even make it easier for you to make that floor. So you've got something to model up to when you put your ceiling in. So I think it's a good idea definitely at some point to put that extra floor in. I'm not going to do that now though, I'm just going to make the level for it to help us set out what's underneath, and that's obviously going to be our ceilings. So over here you can see we've got the levels nicely set out, and so we're going to say this 3.5 ground floor FFL, that's our 0, and then we need to of course subtract that from this level above to work out how high it is from, or the difference between those two levels. So what's it going to be? Can't even think this morning. 5.4. So back into Revit, and I'll go to the section view, and you can see there we've got the levels that were made last time for the ceilings that we're about to make. But I'm just going to make one more level. Now, above those, for, let's just say it's level 1, and it should be 5.4. Okay, so you'll see as we start to make things now that need to go above this ceiling level, it's helpful to have that level above. So they're the levels that I need. So again, we've got the two ceiling levels. If you don't have either of those, make sure you've got those two, 3400 and 4050, and then this last level 1. So let's go back and have a look at the drawings then. So we've got now a essentially a bulkhead, or a ceiling that drops down from the main, or from the higher ceiling level. That's at that height 3.4, and so I'll start with that one. And we need to get an idea how far across this comes, because I don't think we have a actual ceiling plan, do we? Oh yes, we do. Okay, so that's the RCP, the reflective ceiling plan. It's showing more detail than we need, but we can hopefully see there this line of bulkhead, and that can actually be inserted. So I'll maybe just don't do that. So going into the ground floor ceiling plan, just like you have with the ground floor floor plan, you can duplicate that view, and here you duplicate with detailing. We both do the same thing. If you're not sure, just avoid that duplicate as dependent unless you're really sure you need it. So here I'll just choose duplicate and rename that, and we'll call it ground floor TWG. So I'll go and insert now my image from the V drive. And sorry, I didn't even look what page it was, page 4. Okay, let's put it to the side and scale it. Now here, we maybe, oh yes, we do have dimensions, good. So there aren't as many dimensions as on the other drawings, but we've still got some. And so I'm just zooming in to find a measurement or a dimension. and then I'm making sure that the image is still selected, so I've clicked, and you can see in properties it says that I've got a raster image, so I know it's selected, and I click scale, and get the point there, maybe zooming in to make sure I get the very middle of that dimension, and coming across to the right, and get the centre line of the dimension on the other side. And I'm going to zoom out, and I didn't, oh, what's that angle? That's a bit weird. I'm just going to press escape so I can try that again. It seemed to snap to something I didn't want it to, so I'll again select the image, click scale, and zoom in, get that point. That looks good. So I think I maybe, yeah, wasn't careful enough with the angle, so I'm going to make sure that this stays horizontal. Click. That's better. Okay, so then I need to type in that measurement that I've just picked up by clicking 8275, enter, and of course that's now the right size, but I need to drag it to the right location, and I might use the move tool to pick up a base point right on the corner of that wall there, and go down and click onto the corner the walls that I've made, of course, in Revit. And so that seems to be lining up well enough. Obviously not perfect, but close enough. It's just for this line of the ceiling really that we're doing this. So I'm happy with that, I think. Yeah, it's not perfect, but it'll do. So I'm going to, while the image is still selected, click pin just to make sure it's staying locked in place. And then what I might do is draw a reference plane, and I'm going to give you the measurement for this, so you can actually use this measurement. You maybe don't even have to insert that image, but you know, if you're thinking about doing things that need to pick up these other elements on that ceiling, then it's still a good idea to insert it, like I just said. So here I'm going to put in a reference plane tracing along the edge there of our bulkhead. And we need this, so to bring it out so that I can see it clearly. Now I'm going to switch back to my original ground floor ceiling plan so that I can see that reference plane and the other things without that image that I've inserted getting in the way. So then I'm actually going to dimension from the reference plane at the front to the new one I've just made so that I can give you that measurement. 4015, that sounds good. It's going to do one extra thing though, just to make sure. I'm going to click on that reference plane and make sure, yeah, that it is a round number, because sometimes it'll round it off, and you know, it might not be a round number. So just wanted to check that. So again, 4015 is what I selected. Also the distance from that reference plane to the other. And it's important that you have that, because now if we go to, say, a section view, again we can see that reference plane there as well. So that maybe, you know, gives you a better idea, hopefully, of the importance of reference planes and why they're used a lot in Revit, because they go through from, you know, views like your plan to views like sections and elevations as well. So back to my, again, ground floor ceiling plan, and I'll make my first ceiling. So, well, I'll show you what will happen if you don't change some of the settings, just so you understand it more. If I go just to make a ceiling, then you can see it's actually coming up with a red boundary on the walls, because I've got that automatic ceiling option chosen. I'm going to say maybe don't use that one to begin with until you get used to it. Use sketch ceiling, it's generally more consistent. So then I'm going to change the level over here to ceiling 1. So that's going to be the height of our ceiling. So we want that ceiling to sit exactly on that level, so I'm also going to change the height offset below that to 0. So it's not offsetting the ceiling at all from this level, it's going to sit exactly at that height. And then I'll go to pick walls, and it should let me pick, this time, the inside of those walls. This is like a drop ceiling that drops down inside all of these walls. I'll pick those walls, and then I'll pick using pick lines. So that was pick walls up here, but now I've got to use pick lines to get the reference plane, because it's not a wall. So we can't use pick walls to get that. Pick lines, though, of course, works with everything. So now I can use trim to corner and just join those lines together, so we've got basically a rectangle. Without changing any other settings, I'm going to click tick to finish, and it should have given me a warning. Obviously they've taken that out, but yeah, I wish they still would give you the warning, because what I was expecting to happen has happened, and that is that we can't see the ceiling. So if we could see the ceiling, there would be a line there along that reference plane. But we can't see it, so that means we can't see the ceiling in this view. Now it's there. I know I've made it. If I go to the axonometric view, we'll see it. It is there. So, why can't we see it? Exactly, yeah, the view. So it's all to do with the view settings. Exactly, that's it. So the view isn't looking up high enough to see our ceiling. And this is common with ceilings. You'll often need to adjust your view settings, even with ceiling plans, to see the ceilings you've made. So, and it's to do with the levels. So, scrolling down, I'm in the ground floor ceiling plan. So you can see it says ceiling plan in properties. So I know I'm changing the properties of the ceiling plan. Scrolling down, you'll find view range. And that's the setting you need to adjust normally. So click edit. And you can see here now the reason that it doesn't show the ceiling. Because the top is the ceiling level that I put the ceiling on. So it's stopping at that level. Right? So it can't see the ceiling because the ceiling begins at that level. So the simple solution is either to take it to a higher level, ceiling 2 would work, or level 1, that's even higher. But with single story spaces, like this one, often you can just set that to unlimited. And then it's going to see everything above the view. The view depth has to be set at least as high as the top. I know it's counterintuitive, you'd think view depth is down, but in the ceiling plan, view depth is up. So it also needs to be unlimited in this case. If I'm going to make top unlimited, then the view depth has to be unlimited. And so you can see this diagram explains it all. Have a good look at that if you really want to understand view range. This does explain it pretty well. And so here you can see this is that's our top. And we're actually, there's not, the top is infinite in this case, but that's how it's set. So I'll click OK, and there's our line. So that's the edge of my ceiling. And we need that to be visible in order to place lights in the ceiling. If you can't see the ceiling, you can't put lights into it. So I'll go and make my next ceiling, the higher one, using the same method. I'm just going to click ceiling and go to sketch ceiling and go to pick walls to choose those edges on the inside of my wall. So it's always easiest if you've got a drop ceiling, keep it on the inside of your wall, and then you don't have to worry about how it joins or connects into your walls, because it's just going to sit inside. So I'm just zooming in to try and get this edge of my wall. Remember, if it won't pick it, well, there, it's got it now, but if it isn't behaving, try using tab to highlight the things you want. But if it still isn't doing what you want, remember you can always, just like a floor, you can just draw lines if you want to, if pick walls isn't picking the right thing. So here again, drawing a line, I can just draw along the inside. Curtain walls usually need this to happen, so we need to draw tracing the inside of that frame, because the ceiling should sit inside that. And then again, trim to corner, drawing this, because of course still needs to be closed shape. and then one more line, of course, for the reference plane. And sorry, that's just a habit of mine, picking reference planes. I could have picked the edge of the ceiling actually, but just a habit. So, yeah. So that's the shape of our other ceiling. And over in properties now, I'm just going to change that to my ceiling 2 level. Leave the height offset to 0. Tick to finish. And if you can see it highlighted like that, it's visible in the view, even if you can't see the edges of it. So when I'm clicking, because I've got that nice select by face option turned on, just click in the middle and select those 2 ceilings. And again, if you can do that, that means the ceiling is visible in the view. Now, we've got a problem though, because if we look in the axonometric view, you're going to see that there's a gap. We don't want that. Right, so there are a few options there. You could build a wall or model in manually using some of the modelling tools that you have with Model in Place. You could model that extra part of the ceiling in there, which really functions like a wall. So that would work. Another option, if you just want to get it done quickly, would be to make this ceiling really thick and add enough thickness to go up to here. But now I think about it, actually, that's probably a bit messy, and we've got time to do it the right way. So, you know, because that's what, 700 mil, that's fairly large. We don't really want a ceiling that thick. It's going to be a bit ugly in your drawings. So I think it's nicer to model in something. And it's a good chance to start looking at the modelling tools. So going back to my, I'll do it again in ground floor ceiling plan. And you may be thinking, well, why, if I've got these ceiling levels, why aren't I using those to make my ceilings? So ceiling 1, and ceiling 2, I just want to open them so you can see why we don't use those for ceiling plans. And it's a common mistake people make. When they make levels for ceilings, they'll then think, I go and draw on those to work with my ceiling plans. But those levels are actually not useful at all, especially for ceiling plans. Because if you think about what they're going to show, go to a section. So remember, a plan is just a horizontal section. So the cut plane for, let's say, the ground floor ceiling plan, right? The cut plane goes through at about this height, right, between the levels. But then, unlike the floor plan that looks down, it looks up. So that's why in the ground floor ceiling plan, we can see from here and look up to those 2 ceilings that I've made. But this is ceiling 1, so its cut plane's up here. So it's cutting through nothing and then looking up into empty space. And so the same with ceiling 2. So essentially those 2 ceiling plans are useless. There's no need for them. So I'm just going to delete those. There's no need to have them. I'm going to right click, delete, and the same with ceiling 2. Just for the ceiling plans. It can, believe it or not, it can actually be useful to have floor plans for those ceiling levels. You'll see later. But the ceiling plans for those ceiling levels are not useful at all. And don't be afraid to delete plan views, either floor plans or ceiling plans, because they're easy to recreate and you're not deleting the model. The levels are what host the geometry, so you have to delete the levels to delete everything on ground floor. The views are separate, so you delete views. So now I'll go back to my ground floor ceiling plan and go to component, model in place, and I'm going to choose ceilings as my category. And let's call it bulkhead. Projection. Spell, yep. Sorry. Yep, here we are. Okay, so now I'm just going to make an extrusion. Clicking on the extrusion button up there, of course, and I'll draw a rectangle going from the edge of this reference plane down to the left, and I'm not really worried about how far across I go as long as I finish it on the edge of this wall at the bottom. And then as before, I'm going to finish that, I'm going to cancel, so that then I can select this edge here. It's annoying, it's going to the wrong thing, so I'll show you a good trick. If you find the dimensions come up going to something you don't want, I want it to go to here. Good trick there, just zoom in. And you'll see then it should pick up the smaller thing, so I'll zoom in a bit more. And there we are, so now it's dimensioning to here. Now you can drag that, you can always change where it's measuring by dragging that marker as well, but that zooming can help. So then I'll put in my measurement, and I'm really not worried if it's not the exact size, so let's say our ceiling's about 100 mil thick, so we'll make it 100. Maybe we can always adjust it if you have to later, so 100 should be okay. And there we are. So, okay, so then I'm going to show you a really good trick. I'm going to change the plane that this is drawn in. You might be thinking, well, this is great, you've done an extrusion, but if you've been paying attention to the levels, you can see it's on the ground floor level. So it's sitting on the floor. That's all right. I'm going to finish it, and then go to Edit Work Plane. That's a really good trick. So here, Edit Work Plane, and you can change the level that your extrusion begins on, and often makes it easier when you do it after you've made it. You'll see. So here, ceiling 1, okay, and now I can see it in this view, because remember it's a ceiling plan, looking up towards the ceiling. Okay, so I've made the extrusion, and then to fine tune and adjust the height, I'm now going to go to that section view, and zoom in, and you can see it there, of course, starting on that ceiling level. I want it to go and start at the top of the ceiling, so I'll just then drag that base up and snap it to the top, and then drag the top up and snap it to the top of that other ceiling. You might think, well, yeah, okay, that's all right, but it's a bit messy because it's not joined to the other ceilings. So I'm now going to finish this, and we can still then use the join tool. This isn't essential, but it's a nice thing, to then choose the previous ceiling, and then my new, it's still a ceiling, my new extrusion, and then the same, join that to the other ceiling, and it looks as one continuous thing. So that's just to show you that when you model things using model in place, as long as you use the right categories, they're just like the things you make, say, a ceiling with the ceiling tool. If you set an extrusion to the ceiling category, as far as Revit's concerned, it's a ceiling, just like the other ones. And that's really helpful later when you start putting lights into things. So I've got my ceilings, maybe I'll go back to a camera view now, and we can see that. And of course now, when I render, it's going to be really dark, because we don't have any sunlight. Well, we'll have a little bit, but it's going to be just coming through the shop front, and yet really dark. Now that's good, because you're doing an interior space in retail which generally doesn't have natural light, or not much natural light. And you know about the Gruen factor? No? Yes? You must know the show.
Oh yeah, I know the show.
Yeah.
Gruen was
Yeah.
who originally came up with the concept of a show.
Exactly. Yeah.
And to confuse the senses
Exactly.
to keep the person in there longer.
Exactly, that's right. So, no natural light. Exactly, exactly. That's right. Yeah. So, and it's a huge area. If you're interested in the architectural research in that, there's a lot of people who've, like serious architectural theorists, who've written books about Las Vegas and the architecture there. Really interesting. So yeah, but yeah, start with the Gruen thing. It's really interesting for interiors. I think it's essential to know that, because so much of your work is retail and you know, similar things, fit outs. So here now, I can go to my ground floor ceiling plan, and it's going to be really easy to put my lights in. The hard work is getting the ceilings usually. So now if I go and choose component, just to get a basic setup, go to load family, and if it's not there, choose the metric library shortcut on the left. You go to lighting, architectural, internal. I'll show you some of the lights I've made later, but just wanted to show you, make sure you know about the new lights they have now with the newer versions of Revit. They've put some improved versions of things like the downlights. So you've got the recessed can one, which is the old one, which always had some issues. But this one here, downlight round LED, is basically an improved version of that one. So I'm going to try that, downlight round LED. Just show you why a lot of people still avoid it, because there is an issue with this one as well. Just the way it starts, it comes up with this option, it's a bit annoying, place on vertical face, which is good if you want to put it on the wall, but if you want to put it onto a ceiling, you have to change it to this option, place on face. And honestly, it should start on that. I don't know why it didn't start that way, but now it will work. Okay, so I can then place these lights on my ceiling, and of course they're working. If you can see them, they're working. I'll show you plenty of other downlights and other things later just to test it. And so I'll go back to load family, and I want to test out that downlight rectangle LED. This one has some preset sizes, so you can just choose anything you like. It's just experimenting really. So again, I'll put a few of these in. Oh God, that's what's going on there? That's bizarre. Yeah, it is. That's huge. Okay, well that's a bit odd. I'm going to. Okay, so those presets are a mess. You'd never want a 15-metre light, so I don't know what they were thinking there. A lot of these things, honestly, they're set up by probably guys in their 20s who are programmers at Autodesk, and some of them really don't know much about architecture, obviously. It's a bit embarrassing. They're good with the technical stuff, but you've got to just remember that they sometimes could be better with the standards. Yeah, it's totally wrong. Yeah, it's just wrong. Yeah. So, yeah, I'd say yeah, possibly yeah. I mean, obviously when they're typing, they just put the wrong numbers in. And I've met a lot of these guys. They're concerned with other things, and not. They need a few more architects in there, I think. So anyhow, now this should be fine. There we are. And I'll just stick a couple near the columns, maybe just see what the reflections and things might look like from there. And I'll put some in this raised ceiling as well, just to get a better idea. So, back to my perspective. Now, when I go to render, and this will be good, when you're rendering this space, I'd say you'll be doing almost all of it with only the artificial lights. So you might use the sun at the beginning just for a little bit of testing, but after that, once you've got some lights, definitely change it over to interior, artificial only. And then just make sure you've got it rendering, and if you can get this set up and working before you put in all of the detail and the complexity of your design, it's a much better process, and you'll be much better off. And then you can, of course, fine-tune things as you put up more detail. You might be thinking, oh God, that's horrible and far too dark, but that's quite normal when you start putting in lights, because the exposure is going to be really different to what we had earlier. So I'll let it finish and then just correct the exposure. I shouldn't have had it on medium, that's why it's just taking a little while, but it shouldn't be too much longer. On medium even, it shouldn't be too bad with just 8 lights. There we go. Okay, so adjust exposure, and you can go down easily to 2 with artificial lights, and I don't have to go that far. So I'd probably say maybe about 4 or 5 is what we want. There we go. Yeah. Slowly getting there, yeah. It's very warm because of the LED light's temperature, but we can correct for that here as well just by making that cooler. And that's starting to get there. There we are. So, yeah, so you can get that set up well before putting in your final design, and it will make life much easier for you when you do actually put your designs in. So, some time to try that.